What's up, y'all? Welcome back. We are about to start the second season of Capitalism Remix, and I'm really, really excited. We have one of my dearest friends, one of the local, I'd say, business luminary here in Baltimore, Smitha Gopal, who is the Chief Operating Officer of EcoMap, which is one of our portfolio companies at Conscious Venture Partners. So thrilled to have this conversation with her. Really, really interesting perspective on everything from, stakeholder capitalism to what's happening in the state of Maryland and where we need to be the most prosperous. So can't wait for you to hear it. Welcome back to the remix. Hi, Smita.
Hey, Jeff, how are you?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm doing all right.
I'm glad we finally got this together. I know we've been trying to get it on the schedule for a long time.
Yeah, you're hard to pin down.
So,
I'm hard to pin down too.
so are you. So are
Yeah,
you.
fair.
Um, but I'm thrilled to have you here and be able to have this conversation. This is the first episode of season two of Capitalism Remix. So
Oh,
you're at the top of the list.
exciting. Well, thank you. I'm honored.
Yeah. So let's just jump right in. This is just a conversation with people I know and I like and I care for and I respect. So you're obviously on that list. But I was thinking about this. Um, both for me and for people who may be listening to this who won't know you. Tell me a little bit about your backstory. Like, how did you end up? I know you went to UVA, you went to Wharton. I think that you went to you went to Thomas Jefferson in in Northern
Yeah, I
Virginia,
did. Yeah.
all right? Which is an amazing high school. But so and then to Baltimore. So trace that trajectory for us.
Sure. Yeah. Let's see. So I grew up in Pittsburgh, moved with my mom to Northern Virginia in middle school. And I had kind of, everyone's childhood, I think, is complicated, but I had a complicated childhood. And we moved to Northern Virginia when I was in middle school. That's how I got the opportunity to go to Thomas Jefferson, which is a very prestigious and like wonderful science-based high school. And then stayed in Virginia for college, went to UVA. When I went to UVA, the number one factor was just affordability. It was so cheap to get such a good education.
That's crazy.
And the high school that I went to also, I mean, it was a public school, a Fairfax County public school, and it was an incredible opportunity, incredible education, but it was free. Yeah, when I was at UVA, I want to say that tuition was something like $4,000 a year.
Oh my
It
God.
was, yeah, it was affordable. So I was able to graduate without any loans. Um, and then I moved to Baltimore for my first job. I worked at a boutique investment bank. It was primarily M&A advisory. I thought I would be here for 2 years. I had plans to go to New York or San Francisco or,
Yeah.
one of
Hmm.
the cool big cities. And Baltimore just kind of grows on you. It gets in you.
It does,
And so
doesn't it?
yeah, I stayed. I didn't intend to stay, but I stayed. And then one day I woke up and I realized I've lived here for longer than I have lived anywhere else. And it really feels like home. And then along the way, while working, did a stint in business school. And so I got the chance to go to Wharton, which, notably was neither free nor $5,000, but was still a really incredible opportunity. Um, and after I left banking, which, happened pretty early in my career, I took an operations role at a fledgling, like family owned healthcare software startup. Really got the opportunity to grow within the organization, eventually became the CEO, got to turn it around, make it profitable, scale it, sold it 2 years ago. And
Yeah.
now I'm at EcoMap, as you know, one of
Yeah.
your portfolio
Yeah.
companies.
Exactly. We're going to get into all of that. But so two things that are interesting to me. So I know that your family is from India, yes?
Hmm.
So, and your mom's been, where's your mom now? is she, in,
She now is back in India. She bought an apartment during COVID. So when everyone was supposed to be like staying home, she really
yeah,
saw a real estate opportunity. So yeah, I'm proud of her that she was able to buy a place. And so now she's there full time and she comes back and she kind of like rotates between her three daughters. And so she visits each of us and then she heads back.
the, so did she move to Pittsburgh from India?
Yeah. So my
So,
dad got a PhD in electrical engineering and he worked
mhm,
on nuclear power. This is like, to date it, I think this is like 1961. So it was like at a time that nuclear power was super important.
yeah,
He finished his studies. He was going back home to India to get married. And the story that my sister tells, I need to fact check, but the story is that he got paged at JFK Airport and he got like a phone call from somebody at Westinghouse and he got a job and they sponsored his visa.
oh
And
my God,
yeah, and so that's how they ended up in Pittsburgh.
oh wow, that's crazy. Um, the other thing that's interesting about that, I know that, like you said, you ended up, working in the medical field a few times, was that the sort of science-based, curriculum at
At Thomas
TJ,
Jefferson.
yeah,
Yeah,
was that
sure.
influenced, or influential in terms of those decisions?
I think definitely. Um I think this even more strongly now that I'm older, but I think, the career that you end up with, the life that you end up with is a function of what you can imagine. And what you can imagine is a function of what you see in childhood and the
Mm,
expectations that adults have for you,
yep,
whether that is your family,
yep,
teachers, people in the community. But I grew up, I don't need to tell a joke about immigrant Indian parents and their expectations, but like, you better be a doctor or a lawyer or else you're a
right,
disappointment. But that's real, right? Like the expectations
yeah,
are real in that community. And it's not just go to college. It's like, okay, and then what are you doing for grad school?
yeah,
And I took a long break. I didn't go back to grad school for like 7 years. And that was the joke in my family. I was like the least educated person. Um, but so yes, absolutely. I think my
yeah.
upbringing and my time at TJ pushed me into science. And also I would say gave me that opportunity to see that, there's more than just hard science. There's more to medicine and healthcare than just being a physician. There are so many
Right.
other elements to the system. And so like that broader perspective, like you could have a passion for something and there isn't just a single path that makes sense. There's like many paths, many opportunities.
Yeah. Well, that sort of flows into the next question, because obviously, we've known each other for a bit, and I know you as a very driven person. So that explains sort of some of it, but I was thinking about what is it that drives you? I mean, yes, you saw the possibilities, your mom, your family, the expectation, but now, what is it that drives you? Sort of what's your purpose? Have you thought about that at all?
Hmm. You know, okay, a couple of things. Number one, are you confused if somebody's not driven in
Am I
life?
con Yeah, look,
I'm confused by that.
yeah, I can imagine you would be, but both of us know people who aren't, right? And I try to, I don't know, I try to not judge them if I can. And it is confusing to me, but I know my own passions, right, and what drives me. Um,
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I guess what I mean is I think everyone has some inherent internal motivation. We all like, I think we all want, like Dan Pink's autonomy, mastery,
yeah,
purpose. Like, and I think some people have a harder time figuring out what their thing is or figuring out how they're going to turn that thing into a life, what, a
yeah,
career or a personal passion. But I feel like everyone is driven in some way about something, and it's about like cultivating that drive and that motivation instead
yeah,
of extinguishing it or telling yourself, that can't ever be a thing, and having those self-limiting beliefs. Um, but going back to what drives me, I would say more and more I think about the world and the choices that I make through a function of how will I explain this to my children?
Ah, okay.
Like when they're older, there's so many, it feels like we have lived through several consequential things that we're going to be
Yep.
talking about. Um, and I want to feel like I'm on the right side of history. I want to be able to tell them that I tried, that I did my best. And I did things that were hard or scary or at personal risk because it felt like it was the right thing to do. And that's what I want for them to do too.
Yeah. Yeah. So that, this idea of wanting to be on the right side of history, that actually confuses me more about
Mm,
people who, who disagree with me, I guess, and disagree with you, excuse me, about what is the right side, what would be the right side, right? And just where we're in the middle of where we are politically, and
yeah.
and even what we're, what this podcast is all about, we'll talk about in a minute. But that actually confuses me more than people, because I think you're right. People are driven towards different things, right? Some people are driven towards, what we do, what they do at work. Other people are driven towards, whatever it is. They want to be a mom, they want to be a dad, they want to, they want to be an artist or whatever it might be. And that I get, and I, as you describe it, I do think I see, as I look around at even people I think aren't quote unquote driven, I can see where their passions lie, right?
Hmm.
But this of wanting to be on the right side of history, which I agree with 100%, right? The, the long arc of bends towards justice, right?
Yeah.
And I just think about people who don't. I'm confused by people who don't see it the same way that I think you and I do. That's
Yeah.
confused. That's more confusing to me.
But do you think that there's anyone out there who is like, I'm content to go down being wrong? Or they also think that they're on the right side of history?
I do think they're on the right side of history, and it's it's one thing that I've had to get. Look, I had to really get sort of comfortable with people who think they're on the right side of history, and I completely disagree.
Yeah.
Just with the last election, there were a lot of friends of mine that were on the other side of the fence, and I just don't. I think they're going to be on the wrong side of history, and they don't, right?
Yeah.
They honestly don't. Now, I think that there are others who don't care about that. I think that there are others who are just in it for their own self-interest, right?
Sure. Yeah, I do think that there's an element of self-interest. Um, the last like several elections, the thing that is the most concerning to me, it's not the people that disagree with me, it is the echo chambers that we can live in, where
Mm,
it feels like everyone around you agrees with you. And
yeah,
the algorithm that's feeding you content agrees with you, and
yeah,
everything is in support of your pre-existing worldview and beliefs. I think that's like the most frightening. And so when I look at people that have different opinions, like the one thing that I am trying to hold on to is like, let's have a conversation.
yeah,
Not so I can change your mind. Like, that's not my goal. I just want to know more about why you think this, or like why you have interpreted
yeah,
these facts in this way. Or do you think that they are facts? Or do you think, like, where is this coming from? Because it's coming from a place of some validity, right?
yep,
Like, I'm not talking to people that are idiots, and I'm not
right,
talking to people that are mentally ill. I'm talking to people who are smart, hardworking, like often
yep,
like they have a family, they belong to a community, like they want, it seems like we want the same things, and the what we believe in terms of the way we're going to get there is just so vastly different.
yeah, yeah. That's a really good point, and I think that the individual conversations are really the only way to get there. I've been a news junkie for a long, long time, and I've sort of stopped watching the news.
Yeah.
Like I've just sort of said, you know what, I've stopped watching the news. I never really got news from social media. but I've stopped watching, network news, and I've stopped watching MSNBC, and the only thing I really watch is CNBC just to see what's happening in the markets, right?
Yeah, same. I just listen to Bloomberg and that's it now.
Yeah, right. Because I think that if you try to, so getting that understanding of what's going on the other side, right? People who may disagree, I think you can only do it one-on-one,
Hmm.
with people who respect in other ways. Like you say, they're hardworking, they want the same things. I respect a lot about them, but I also want to know, how did you get to this place, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Um, Before this election, I spent time like I would look at it's my opposition research. I would just look at the sites and the publications that are like notably on the other
Hmm.
side of my beliefs because it's the same thing, right? Like you are consuming content and it's framed in a way that you value something else or you think something else is the most important issue. So like let me try to understand a little bit more about why that is. And it's like it's true of so many things. Like going back to COVID, people ended up with such very different perspectives about like, should you get vaccinated? Should a vaccine be mandated? Should you wear a mask? Should masks be mandated? And it's like, we all want to be safe.
Yeah.
We're all trying to avoid this thing. How did we end up with such different opinions about the best way to do that?
How much do you think? This is something I've been thinking about a lot lately and trying to do some writing on, but how much do you think this has to do with the way we think about work and business and capitalism, um, in America,
Mm,
and the stories we tell ourselves about that, and then how
yeah.
that sort of puts us on one side or the other?
I think our sense of collective responsibility maybe has never been weaker. And so there's so much room and opportunity for self-interest. You know,
Hmm.
particularly, I'm just going to speak about Americans. But we're safe, we're wealthy, all indicators of, health and access to education and clean air and clean water and basic safety. Like there are certainly exceptions, but like for the most part, we're so fortunate to live in this time and in this country that we don't really have to think about other people.
Yeah,
We don't have to worry about our children being drafted into a war and dying. And so we don't have to care about foreign policy. It's a good idea to care about foreign policy, but like it's not going to hit home. Your child is not getting drafted tomorrow, and you don't have to worry about them living.
yeah,
You most likely don't have to go do a job that might kill you. Whereas in past decades, a lot of people did. We are so free of these external threats and so safe from things that like need to be addressed through collective action that it's just sort of like, how can I get more? How can I personally accumulate more wealth, do the things that benefit me? I'm just in it for me because
yeah.
I don't have to think about anybody else. Everyone else is fine.
It's a really, I'm telling you, Smitha, there's something that I have not accessed that. You know that I'm thinking about writing a book about all this,
Yeah.
but that's a really, really interesting perspective, right? If I don't have to care about this because of the prosperity and all of the things that go along with being here in this time. If I don't have to care about this, why would I care about someone operating their business with a more holistic mindset? Because
Yeah.
it doesn't really matter.
It doesn't
It's
matter
not.
to me.
Yeah, it doesn't matter to me. That's a really, I'm gonna have to think on that one for a
All right.
while, because it really, I think it impacts a lot of, obviously, the work I do, right? I mean, um, the whole point of this podcast is to challenge people to think differently, or maybe investigate their own preconceptions about
Mm-hmm.
the story we tell ourselves around business, and could it be better, could it be different? But
Mm-hmm.
if it's not going to really impact you, um, you know, I think that's something else, right? It's something else to think about. It's interesting because when I tell the story, I don't use conscious capitalism very much anymore, and I'm getting away from even not stakeholder capitalism and more towards stakeholder management. And I'm just describing, people say, well, tell me what it's all about, right? And I'm like, well, if all you want to do is make money, how are you going to do that? You have to have employees that really care about what you're doing on a day-to-day basis, right? You have to have suppliers, or it would be great to have suppliers who brought you innovations and didn't take them to your competitors. It would
Mm-hmm.
be great if your customers wanted to be in a relationship with you as opposed to just a transaction. It would be great if communities welcomed you instead of putting up barriers to entry. So shouldn't we all want to operate our business that way? Maybe this is the path to how I have this discussion about why should I care, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
what we say is because we think it's the best way to manage a business. It's the best way to get to profitability is by not necessarily focusing myopically on shareholders. So,
Mm-hmm.
um, I- you know, how does that, how does that, I'd be interested, how does that sit with you? Even in the context of this, what you just said about what we have to care about, what we don't have to care about. How does that
Yeah.
whole discussion sit with you?
I mean, obviously, I'm aligned with that way of thinking, and that makes sense to me. It's consistent with my worldview. It also feels
Hmm.
like that's the right thing to do, but also it is the thing that makes the most sense. But I think linking what you're saying back to that idea of people have more permission to be self-interested now. The
Hmm.
thing you said that resonates the most might be wouldn't it be interesting if your suppliers brought innovation to you instead of to your competitors? And so I think it's like getting people to think about unintended consequences and how those could be positive or they could be very damaging. That might be a way to get those self-interested folks back into the like, oh my goodness, like I am part of a collective, and what happens to other stakeholders, other people also has an impact on me.
Yeah, yeah, that's a new strain, right? It's a new
Yeah.
strain for the book. It really is, right? It's a new because I think that this um, permission to be self-interested, you have to, for me, I have to figure out how that relates to this whole idea I'm trying to put forth.
Yeah.
You know, um, the other piece of this, and I think that you've already started to answer this, but I've watched you over the time we've known each other, over the years we've known each other, and you seem to be a pretty hard. I was going to say hardcore, but it's probably not the right way to describe it. It's sort of like a taskmaster of an executive, right? I think about you. You remind me a lot of my old business partner, Rick. Um, you both don't suffer fools, right? And cut to the chase, and this is what needs to be done. So, how do you think about that? And I have my own ideas about it, but how do you think about that with respect to the also this idea of managing for stakeholders and managing business differently? You're very good at what you do, you've been successful. How do you think those two things come together or diverge or support each other or don't?
No, you're sort of like calling me out a little. Like I have both I believe in everyone in the collective, but also
Yeah,
get it done.
yeah, absolutely, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's a good question. I think that, what do I think, Jeff?
Well, I'll tell you, here's one of the
Yeah.
things, maybe a way to think about this. I always tell people, you know, I think that you have to, if you're operating in an organization, you have to find a way to motivate people and get them to care about what you care about.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't make me not a capitalist, right?
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't mean everybody gets what they want all the time, right?
Mm-hmm.
But
Totally.
I still have to think about how do I, we have to motivate differently today than they had to motivate in the 50s, right? It was a paycheck and that's it,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
we have to
Yeah.
motivate differently, I think, today. So I don't know if that,
Sure. Yeah. And I mean, this is a subtlety, but maybe it's important. I think I don't think about motivating people. I think about how we can create alignment.
yeah,
Like
mm,
you as a person, and maybe this goes back into the you look at people who have such different political beliefs, and you're like, wow, how did you and I both take the same set of facts and come to such different conclusions? But so,
yeah,
like, people believe what they believe, and I think that that applies to their motivation and their feelings about their work. Like, I'm probably not going to change you. If you don't care about something, like, I don't think I can make you care. I think the best I can do is align what you care about with what I care about. And can
hmm,
I like show the connection between these two things? And I think that's like the place and the space where you can have really productive conversations. And like if you can understand better, like what makes this person tick,
yeah,
like maybe you should be on this bus with me at this company, but like you are in the wrong seat right now.
yeah,
And the thing that you care about is different from what this role is, but like there's a different role for you. I've never had success with making somebody care about a thing they don't already care about.
right. Yeah, no, that's a good point. Yeah, I think alignment is really the right word, right?
Yeah.
How do we get people, no matter um, what your political point of view or your moral point or ethical point of view, if we're going to do this thing together, right? How do we
Mm-hmm.
make sure that we're going in the same direction?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I want to let me change direction for a minute. Speaking of direction, um, is there, you talked about this earlier. You're a financial analyst. You went to a science high school. You went to a great university, MBA, and then you went to, from financial analyst, you went to the operations side,
Yeah.
right? And mostly in medical, VP, CEO. Now you're a COO for a startup, EcoMap. Give them another shout out. Um, do you think that there's any sort of string or theme or theory of change or whatever you want to call it that's sort of
Oh,
weaved through each one of those, one job to the next, either purposefully or just it is what it is, it came about, but you've seen it across those different roles. Anything that you think ties those together?
oh, the thread of my career. Sure. Um, I think about, I mean, this is going to sound whatever. I think about value creation. And so
Hmm.
investment banking was the place where I got to learn about that. And I got to learn about how the industry thinks about value,
Yeah,
right? It was like very practical, like what is an EBITDA multiple? What is a forward-looking multiple, etc. And so that was just kind of like the training to understand. And then my time at the healthcare startup was value creation in a different way. Like you look at healthcare spending and the percentage of GDP, and it is both too large and growing at too fast a clip. And so it's like spiraling costs. You don't see dramatically better outcomes. Americans are not healthier than our peers. We're actually less healthy than people in other developed nations. And so like from the beginning, it just sort of felt like if healthcare, the system, like if we could get better at using technology, so many so many efficiencies could be unlocked and so much value in the form of longer life expectancy, better quality of life, like improved patient outcomes. There's so much value to unlock. And it just felt natural that like you have a fixed capacity. Like you only have so many providers. It takes a very long time to get people through training, to get them to be good physicians. Like you can't really increase capacity that much that fast. And it's very expensive. And you can't really reduce patient need that much that fast. So you have to figure out like what are the efficiencies that could exist between provider and patient. Technology is like at the forefront of that. And yet you have on the IT side in healthcare, you still have like there's so much bloat, there's so much waste, there's so many terrible software systems that are out there. And we could get into all the many reasons for that. But
Yeah.
that was like that's where I came from. That if we could help doctors and patients communicate better, more efficiently, both in terms of time and in terms of comprehension and shared language, that then you free up time for both the provider and the patient to like have a more meaningful conversation and to get to the answer, whether that's the diagnosis or the treatment plan or adherence, like they can get to that part of a conversation and have a better conversation because we did the more basic education and like maybe we did it asynchronously for the patient. Maybe we did it during dead time when they were sitting in the waiting room or they were
Hmm.
between the tech and the provider coming in. So like that was the thesis there. And I would say at EcoMap, it's somewhat similar in that, on the one side, you have so many entrepreneurs, so many people with good ideas who could start a business or who could grow their businesses faster. And then you have so many interested parties, whether they are investors, whether they are government agencies, whether they are just people that reside in the community that want to offer mentorship or other support. Like you should have such good alignment. You have all of the pieces of the puzzle.
Hmm.
And in thriving ecosystems, those pieces come together in an efficient way. In stagnant ecosystems, they don't.
They don't. Yeah.
And so it's a similar, like, can you apply technology to then create value? Like, can you get entrepreneurs to the resources that they need faster? Can you help funders and other stakeholders identify like the most promising companies, most promising individuals? And like,
Yeah.
it's not necessarily the people that are getting the most press or like the people that you know already. There are
Yeah.
some
Yeah.
real diamonds out there that you don't know about yet. And so if
This.
there's a thread, I think it's that.
Yeah. This. It's interesting because I've never talked to an entrepreneur who was starting a business, particularly early stage, and said, why are you doing this? And they've said, because I want to make a lot of money.
Hmm.
They always talk about some wrong they're trying to improve, some value they're trying to create. So this idea of, you thinking about health span, right? Not necessarily lifespan. How do we make this better for patients and doctors? And if it reminds me of what Peter Drucker said, companies don't make money. They make shoes or glasses or technology or software. And if they do a really good job of that, really good job meaning create value for their constituents, then the profit will be an outcome of that. It's so interesting to me that then you get as companies get bigger, I think it's really really difficult to that uh, keep that mindset, to keep
Hmm.
that vision, right? The bigger you get, the more outside investors you have. In fact, we had Kip Tyndall on the show a couple of weeks ago, and who was the founder of the Container Store, and
Hmm.
he left the Container Store because he was like, we couldn't do what I wanted to do once we went public.
Hmm.
Too many investors, too many different constituencies wanting to that didn't really care about the value we were creating for customers, right? They only cared about the bottom line, and they I think that they lose sight that to strengthen the bottom line, you still have to create that value, right? So it's so interesting to me as a trajectory of businesses as they grow, it's harder to maintain that focus on value or
Yeah.
value in that way,
And value
right?
creation. Yeah.
Yeah,
And I think this goes back, I think we're developing a theme here in this conversation, but I feel like this goes back a little bit into like, how do you define value and how do I define value? And
right.
if we're thinking about every stakeholder, then like by definition, it's not just the bottom line, right? It's like the sustainability, how many lives are touched, are we making the world a better place? Like there's so many more qualitative measures
Yeah.
that matter. And when it comes to those, I think we can all agree those things matter. But when it comes to relative value of something that's like by definition qualitative, how do you decide
Hmm.
what's more important and like how much more important? Like you have to potentially assign value or you have to come up with a matrix or you have to have
Yeah.
some like these are our principles. We'll never do things that are harmful in these ways. Like I don't
Yeah.
know that there's a one size fits all answer.
No, I don't think there is a one size fits all answer, but I think that it's when I put my consultant hat on, I always say I don't have any good answers. I got really good questions,
Yeah.
and that's right. And that's one of those questions is how are you going to decide assign value? How are you going to make these decisions, right? And to me, it comes back to what do you care about? Why are you doing this? What's your purpose? And look at the through that lens, and that's how that helps you make those decisions, right?
Hmm.
Um, yeah, I think that's a really it's an interesting question. Well, it's one of the reasons why I never, people ask us, are you an impact fund? Are you an impact program? And I say, yeah, in many ways we are. But I don't use like the terminology like the triple bottom line, right?
Hmm.
Because I'm like, the triple bottom line suggests that you could, as it's traditionally defined, people, planet, and profit, that you could turn off the profit, knob and turn up the people and planet knob, and you'll still be okay.
Right.
And we know that's not true because
Right.
if you're not making money, you can't, no mission, no margin, no mission, right? If you're not making money, you're not running a business. But to me, it's always about it matters how we make the money, right? And that's the
Hmm.
lens I use to look through it to make those value-based decisions, right?
Hmm.
We know that we have to create financial value or else we're not going to be around for very long. But it really matters how we're doing it. And if we can focus on those other, extra financial value, right? And
Hmm.
how they impact the rest of the organization. That's how I try to think about it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
totally agree.
Um, let's, I got another pivot for you.
Okay.
Who, um, because, just in around Baltimore, where you and I are grounded. I'm going to talk a little bit about that in a minute, but there's a lot of people who look up to you because of what you've done and your stature and your presence in the community. Who are the leaders that you look up to? Who that you sort of either try to model yourself after or you admire?
Mm, that's a great question. Um, let's see. There's a category of people that I admire for saying the difficult things and
Mm-hmm.
being brave. Particularly young people like Malala, um,
Mm-hmm.
Greta. Like, I think that there is a confidence that they
Yep.
have that I did not have at their age, that I don't think I have now, at twice their ages, um, that I really admire. Um, and then beyond that, I think there's a whole category of people who I think are sometimes considered notable because they don't fit the mold. So like I have been thinking about like female philanthropists. I feel like I
Mm-hmm.
just read something about Mackenzie Scott and Melissa French Gates, and certainly the two of them have
Yep.
gotten a lot of coverage. Mackenzie Scott especially, and well deserved for the
Yep.
work that she's doing and the way in which she's distributing wealth. Like incredible, incredible. But I also just read the story about, okay, I got to check my notes. Mary Elizabeth
Yeah.
Garrett. Do you know who that is?
I don't.
I didn't either, but she funded almost all of Hopkins Medical School. Like the founders had
Really?
an idea, they wanted to open a medical school. They had evidently like $0. This woman was the daughter, like she was the heiress of something. She and her friends, they had a group. They were like the Friday evening ladies, and they got together
Yeah.
routinely and they got to hang out and they also talked about the good things that they could do with their money. And one of the good things that they did was fund Hopkins. Like they gave enough money to open the medical school. And their conditions were that the school had to admit women. And I thought that this was wild. The school had to admit applicants who had a bachelor's degree in science. Like, I guess you used to be able to become a doctor without having that
Yeah.
credential,
I didn't know that.
which is
She
like,
sounds
she sounds so cool. right?
Sounds
Like
like
that's
someone we should more of us should know about. Yeah.
exactly right. That's a whole other point. Like, why do we not know her name?
Yeah.
Um, but she sounds so cool, and I bet that those things just felt like very obvious to her. Like, of course, you should let women into your school because women are just as
Yeah.
competent as men and they could be great doctors. And also, let's let in people that have a science-based education. Um, but like she was unusual for her time, and the perspective that she brought was probably considered novel. Like these things were not the norm. Hopkins was, I
Yeah.
believe, the first medical school to routinely admit women. So it's like you're bringing these wild and crazy ideas that feel very foundational and basic to you. And so I really admire people that are like that in a lot of different fields, a lot of different industries. Like you may have something that feels very like it's obvious, it's something that you need or it's something that you have experienced in
Hmm.
life. And so you understand that it's important. And when you come into a space with people who are not like you, like they've never even considered this thing. And so your lived
Hmm.
experience, if it is shared and if it can be heard and valued, has the potential to make whatever um, business or product offering or service, whatever it is, like it can become
Yeah.
so much stronger.
Yeah. That's really cool. um, Um, let's talk about sort of where we are today. You and I are pretty well grounded here in this ecosystem in Baltimore.
Hmm.
Lots of connections, lots of mutual connections and connectivity. I'm actually doing the podcast today from Spark,
Hmm.
visiting Siobhan Cherry. We had some of our companies come over and spend the day showing them everything that Baltimore has to offer and where they might end up if they wanted to relocate their businesses here. Um,
Hmm.
how are you feeling about where we are collectively? And I say we, I'm just talking about the startup community, the startup business community here in Baltimore, where things are, and what do you think needs to happen over the next, say 3 to 5 years, um, to create the business climate or the level of prosperity that would feel good to you?
Hmm. It's a very complicated and difficult question.
and
Um, I
and
know you're,
answer it in 30 seconds. No,
yeah,
kidding.
sounds good. I know you're asking about the startup community, but I feel like we can't talk about the success of startups or the success of the business community if we're not talking about the success of Baltimore and Central Maryland, um,
Hmm.
and all of the people.
Hmm.
I don't think any of us want a situation where there's like a tech elite and then like everybody else. That doesn't work. And so when we talk about growth and prosperity, it has to be accessible to everyone who lives here. So I think the rest of my answer is going to have very little to do with tech and
It's okay. Yeah.
entrepreneurship. And it's more of just like, what do the people of Baltimore and the people of Central Maryland need more broadly? And I think so here, I mean, I'm just going to kind of spitball some things.
Yeah.
It feels like we lack a long-term plan and that we need to create like a shared vision of what prosperity means and then work backwards to talk about the plan. I think that because we aren't doing that foundational thing, we end up having fights where people who are, I'm going to call them single issue voters. That's not really what they are, but people who feel
Hmm.
very passionately about one thing come into like the community square, like the town square, and they are just beating the drum for that one thing. And then we end up having fights. Like I don't know if you recall, but a couple years ago we had this real conversation about funding for city schools and funding for the police department. And people
Hmm.
came at it with like, well, you better fund schools or else you're going to have more children that grow up and turn to a life of crime, and then you're going to need more police. And it's like,
Right.
okay, but like who decided that the next dollar that the city spends, it's either going to the schools or it's going to the police? And so these two institutions need to be at odds, and people need to pick a side. Are you on the side of children or are you on the side of the crime fight? Like it is a
Yeah.
it's a false choice, right? But
Yeah.
like we have not collectively decided, like, do we want to be the kind of place where we have great public schools, and I mean great public schools in all pockets of the city, not
Yep.
just like shining stars that, by the way, like, oh, those happen to be the schools where you can't get in if you
Yep.
don't live within the zoned neighborhood. And if you want to live in the zoned neighborhood, the housing prices are double or triple what they are
Yeah, you can't
elsewhere.
afford to live there.
And
Yeah.
so you can't
Uh-huh.
afford to live there, so your kids can't go to those schools. Like, do we want to be the kind of place that has fantastic public schools? And can we agree that that's a thing that we want to do? And if that's part of the shared vision, can we also agree that, like, maybe that means sending your children to the public school instead of the independent school?
Yep.
Like, I mean, there's a lot of difficult things that we're not talking about. And I think that people here, like, it's like we're looking for a silver bullet. Most recently, it was in the form of like the tech hub designation.
Yep.
Before that, years ago, it was like, if we just land Amazon HQ2, if we just, like,
Uh-huh.
these are not the solution. We have to decide what is the future that we want, and let's work together and build it. And it is, I think we have all of the assets that we need. Maryland is one of the most prosperous states, and we have, like, whatever your lens is it culture and community and arts? Like, we have incredible anchor institutions. Is it
Yep.
like geographic presence, like between Amtrak and 95 and BWI? Like, we have public transportation, we're very lacking, but
Yeah.
access, like the, we're the
But
westernmost Atlantic port city, like we have all of these assets, and we are not having the difficult conversation about specifically what do we want our future to look like. And then, like, let's just work it backwards and we could knock out a lot of the like systemic things that plague us if we were aligned on the thing that we want to do.
yeah. Yeah, that's such a it's such a elevated answer to this because I think that you're right, and I've I've pushed back on a lot of this over the years myself. The HQ2 thing was just there's no silver bullet, right?
Right.
There's no white knight.
No
You
one's coming to
just
save us.
No one's
We
coming
have
to
to
save
save
us.
ourselves.
No one is coming to save us. Build a plan, work towards a plan. No one's coming
Hmm.
to save us. It's not one thing. It's all of these things together. So I couldn't agree with you more. Um, Look, this has been fantastic. I'm glad that we got to do this. And now I'll end with my favorite question of all of them. It's the desert island discs question.
Are people
So
confused about what the discs are? Do you mean CDs?
yeah, not no, not. Some people are confused, but most people are old enough to know what I'm talking about. I mean, so, but let's put it this way. You are trapped on a desert island,
Hmm.
and you can pick 5 songs or 5 albums. You can do albums, or you can mix
Okay.
and match. You can do a song
Okay.
and an album. What are the 5 songs and or albums that
Oh
you're going to have with
gosh.
you? And that's it. You don't have, that's all you get
Okay.
on your desert island.
5 is tough. All right. My children love Taylor Swift, and so they have made me love Taylor Swift.
Okay.
So I think a Taylor Swift album, I'm trying to decide which one, maybe Lover.
Okay.
Okay.
Don't forget
Um,
to, Zay, you're writing these down because we put these in the show notes. We're
oh
creating a
God.
disc. Yeah.
So all of the internet can laugh at my
Yes.
choices and judge me.
You're not alone. So,
Okay. Um, I went to see Hamilton for the first time. I think it was shortly after the 2016 election. Maybe it was before. It was at a time when I felt very pessimistic and concerned about
okay.
America and its future. Um, and in watching Hamilton, I felt so reassured, both on the like, we have been through worse and we
Okay.
can get through, like, we got through that. we can get through this. Like, we can get ourselves together as a
Yeah. All
people
right.
because I believe we fundamentally want the same things. So Hamilton soundtrack for sure, because I'm stuck
Soundtrack.
on a
Yeah.
desert island, so I absolutely need some reassurance that it's going to be
Yes.
okay.
The original Broadway cast, I'd say.
Yes, absolutely. Yes.
Okay.
Oh my gosh, tough. This is tough.
You could
Um,
stop with three if you want.
oh,
Although
okay.
most people say three is not enough. That's why I went to five.
Mm, mm. I think I need some music that's just like music that makes you move. So for me, that might be like Linkin Park. Let's go old school. Let's do
Okay.
like Minutes to Midnight. Um, mm,
You're going to be on a desert island. You're going to be there for a long time.
am
You
I
might
going to
want
be there for a
to
long time?
have, well, we don't know how long you're going to be there.
Right,
So
right. This
plan
is
for a long time.
this is extra tough because I just let the algorithm play the music for me. So I'm always listening to something that I like, but
Oh my goodness.
I
Yeah.
know,
No
I
one
know
has
how,
said Spotify.
well, can I say Pandora? My Pandora Plus subscription.
No, we're gonna leave you at three for today. I
Okay,
think
that's fine.
three
We'll
is
leave it at
fine for
three.
you. Yeah,
Great.
I think three is fine. Smita, thank you so much for joining. It's always a pleasure to talk to you. Today's
Thank
been an
you.
extra special pleasure.
This was
And
super fun.
yeah, I'm glad you had fun. And we will we'll send you a little link when we're ready to drop it. But in the meantime, we'll see you soon. Okay, see
Okay,
you around the
thanks so
neighborhood.
much.
All
Take
right.
care. Bye.
Bye bye. Hey, that was an amazing, amazing show. I'm glad you guys were able to join us and hear from my dear friend Smitha Gopal, COO of EcoMap. Shout out to EcoMap, which is one of our portfolio companies. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. And we'll be dropping that soon. We'll have all her discs in the show notes so you can add those to your Spotify playlist. And until next time, this is a remix. We'll see you soon.